Pedro Albizu Campos was born on September 12, 1891, in the vibrant town of Ponce, Puerto Rico. The son of Juana Campos and Alejandro Albizu, he grew up in modest circumstances, shaped by the rich culture and turbulent politics of his homeland. Though his father, a wealthy landowner, was absent from much of his life, Pedro inherited a deep sense of pride from his mother, a hard-working woman of African and Taino descent. Albizu's brilliance was evident from a young age. Excelling in his studies, he earned a scholarship to attend the University of Vermont and later Harvard University, where he studied law and chemical engineering. While at Harvard, Albizu's worldview expanded. Surrounded by discussions of freedom and self-determination, he became acutely aware of Puerto Rico's colonial plight under U.S. rule. This realization would forever alter the course of his life. Returning to Puerto Rico, Albizu became a pivotal leader in the island's struggle for independence. As head of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party, he championed the belief that Puerto Ricans should control their destiny, free from foreign domination. His fiery speeches and unyielding vision inspired thousands to take up the cause.
¡Levantémonos! Sobre todo nuestros propios vicios. Nosotros no somos ni mortales, ni divinos. Y tenemos que aquí en Ponce, aquí donde el enemigo sembró toda su corrupción. Yo puedo decirlo con autoridad porque yo me levanté y me crié aquí. Y no falto a la verdad, que aquí hay que hacer la lucha de la depuración. Aquí hay miles y miles en esta tarde, quizás la multitud más grande que se ha congregado por muchos años en Ponce, a quien tengo el honor de dirigirme en esta tarde. Y con los que hay presentes, se puede hacer no solamente la emancipación de Puerto Rico, sino la emancipación del planeta, si tenemos aquí el espíritu de valor y de sacrificio.
Albizu Campos was instrumental in organizing strikes, protests, and uprisings, most notably the Ponce Massacre of 1937, where peaceful demonstrators were met with brutal force. His leadership galvanized the island, but also made him a target. Through his tireless efforts, Albizu reinvigorated Puerto Rican nationalism. He was fluent in multiple languages, a brilliant orator, and a steadfast advocate for the rights of his people. But his most enduring accomplishment was his ability to unite Puerto Ricans under a shared vision of independence, planting seeds of resistance. But his defiance came at a price. The U.S. government labeled him a radical and arrested him in 1936. Albizu Campos endured physical and psychological abuse, but he remained a symbol of resistance for the Puerto Rican people. He was eventually released in 1947, getting out after 11 years in prison. To crush the independence movement, the U.S. government unleashed an unprecedented campaign of surveillance and repression. One of its most sinister tools was the Carpetas program. The Carpetas program created secret files on over 100,000 Puerto Ricans suspected of supporting independence. Informants infiltrated communities, tracking activists' every move. People lost jobs, were blacklisted, or faced intimidation for even associating with the Nationalist Party. This systematic harassment fractured families and communities, instilling fear across the island. But the spirit of resistance couldn't be extinguished. On October 30th, 1950, the Nationalist Party launched an armed uprising to liberate Puerto Rico. The revolt, known as the Jayuya Uprising, was a bold but desperate attempt to overthrow U.S. control. The insurrection was a cry for freedom, but it was met with overwhelming force from the United States. They declared martial law. Jayuya and surrounding towns were bombed, one of the few times the U.S. has deployed airstrikes on its own soil. Thousands were arrested and they crushed the rebellion within days. Albizu, though not present in Jayuya, was swiftly blamed as the mastermind. Albizu was arrested for the second time on October 30th, 1950, tried and convicted of sedition in a trial many deemed unjust. His courtroom defense was as fiery as his speeches, denouncing the proceedings as a colonial charade. Despite his protests, he was sentenced to over a decade in prison, marking the beginning of a harrowing chapter in his life. In prison, Albizu faced conditions designed to break him. He was subjected to solitary confinement, denied medical care, and exposed to radiation experiments, an allegation that remains one of the most controversial aspects of his imprisonment. His health deteriorated, but his spirit remained unbroken. From his cell, Albizu became a symbol of resistance, his suffering embodying the colonial oppression of Puerto Rico. But the story of Puerto Rico's struggle for self-determination took a dramatic and deadly turn on the morning of November 1st, 1950. On that fateful day, two Puerto Rican nationalists, Oscar Collazo and Griselio Torresola, set out to make a bold statement against U.S. rule. Their target, the President of the United States, Harry S. Truman.
A nationalist uprising in American Puerto Rico in the West Indies is linked with the attempt on President Truman's life. In armed clashes in Puerto Rico, 23 are killed, 15 of them policemen. Trouble broke out when agitators launched attacks on the governor's palace, police stations, and other public buildings. Though the island has virtual self-government, hotheads want to sever all connection with America. Here in Washington, two of them attempted to assassinate President Truman in Blair House, where he is staying during repairs to the White House. Approaching from opposite directions, they opened fire on the police guards. The president's doctor hurries to attend two wounded guards, one of whom has since died. While traces are removed, the FBI rounds up suspects, among them Mrs. Collazo, wife of the surviving gunman.
Truman would later reflect on the attack with a mix of incredulity and resolve, saying, "A president has to expect such things." The attack, while unsuccessful, made headlines worldwide. It painted a vivid and violent portrait of the deep frustrations and tensions surrounding Puerto Rico's status as a U.S. territory. For Oscar Collazo, the lone survivor, it meant the start of a life sentence in a federal prison, a sentence that would later become a rallying point for activists and sympathizers of Puerto Rican independence. As Puerto Rico's plight gained international attention, pressure mounted for Albizu's release. In 1956, Albizu suffered a stroke in prison and was transferred to San Juan's Presbyterian Hospital under police guard. On November 15, 1964, on the brink of death, Pedro Albizu Campos was pardoned by Governor Luis Muñoz Marin. Albizu emerged frail, his body ravaged by years of mistreatment. He died on April 21, 1965. More than 75,000 Puerto Ricans were part of a procession that accompanied his body for burial in the old San Juan Cemetery. With the death of Puerto Rico's most influential leader, decades of fighting would ensue on the island. Fast forward to modern day, and Puerto Ricans find themselves dealing with the echoes of the past. From the lush sugarcane fields exploited for profit to the harsh realities of U.S. military control, Puerto Rico's story under American rule is one of resilience amidst exploitation. We've seen how the island's fertile lands became a battleground for corporate greed, while Puerto Rican workers struggled to survive. We explored the economic devastation caused by policies designed to benefit the mainland, leaving Puerto Ricans trapped in cycles of poverty. But the struggle wasn't just economic, it was deeply personal. Efforts to erase Puerto Rican identity, from banning Spanish in schools to suppressing independence movements, sought to reshape an entire culture. And then there was the fierce resistance, led by figures like Pedro Albizu Campos, whose life and sacrifices became a rallying cry for freedom. This is the story of a paradise burdened by colonial legacy, a place where beauty and struggle coexist. But while the wounds of the past run deep, they have also forged an unyielding spirit of resilience among the Puerto Rican people. As we reflect on this history, we must ask ourselves, what does the future hold for Puerto Rico? Will it find its path to true self-determination, or will it remain caught in the tides of history? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below for what you would like to see next.